Hey, what's up? It's Patrick with Ritual Colorado here, and today we are talking about wired versus wireless ball vapes. We've got some really cool tests to show you, so we're excited to get into that. But first, what do you think of our new shooting space? We're really excited to have somewhere that we can try and create more content. We hope you enjoy it. I mean, me personally, I feel like Winnie Pooh, the anchorman sitting here, just no pants delivering you the news. So I'm pretty happy with the setup. So today we're going to be talking about the QaromaShop. We have the traditional version here. This is my personal model that I've used really heavily. And we're gonna be comparing the traditional wired version with the new detachable version. So what that means is that the coil here actually detaches from the power cord, and then you can put it on your device without being tethered to the wall. So it gives you some flexibility of movement, gives you some freedom there. On the other side, you don't have heat continually pumping into the housing during your hit. And so we're gonna play around today and see if we can really figure out how much of a difference that makes and what the quality of the hit coming out of the wireless QaromaShop is. All right, so to get going, we're gonna go ahead and fire up our QaromaShop. We will be doing all of our tests today on the new detachable coil. Reason being, if we leave it plugged in, it works just the same as the traditional wired version. We did some side-by-side testing with that yesterday and are happy to see that when you're plugged into the pit, it's really consistent results, that same super efficient extraction we've come to expect. So in terms of our hits today, we're going to kind of standardize it just to give you the best sense of what we're looking at. So the first two hits, they're going to be much smaller, about a third of what I normally do in my bowl. And the goal there is to just see for a quicker hit, quicker extraction, do you see any change with the detachable wireless version versus the traditional wired? Now in terms of how I set up my QaromaShop, I run it at 420 degrees and I do a 20-second heat soak. So the heat soak refers to when you take the housing that's hot and you put it over your bowl and then you just let it sit there. I personally do this for about 20 seconds before I take my hit. And what that does is it increases the percentage of conduction heating that's going on in the equation. So the convection heating is the hot air that pulls through when you start drawing through your glass. The conduction is the heating that's coming through the side of the bowls. And as you change that ratio of convection to conduction, you'll find you can get much deeper extraction with a little bit of conduction in the mix. And so today, for our first wired hit, we're going to be running it at 420 degrees, and then we're going to do a heat soak and we're going to hit it. Now, just a quick note on heat soak. Like I said, I normally do a 20-second heat soak. That's based on my normal size bowl, because really for me, the important parameter is at what point in time am I taking the housing back off of the bowl? So when do I remove the heat and stop the hit? So with my 20-second normal bowl, that is generally for me at about a minute 5 seconds. So what we're gonna do with this really small bowl, given that I don't have to take 3 or 4 hits to clear it, we're gonna go ahead and let it heat soak for 40 seconds. And that way, after our 1 or 2 hits, we'll be finishing up right at that same time of about a minute 5 seconds. And so hopefully we'll get that same level of extraction that we're used to. All right, to get started here, we're gonna go ahead and turn on our coil. We'll let that preheat, and while that's preheating, I'll give you a little bit of an overview of what the hits are gonna look like today. So to help standardize, one thing that we will be doing is collecting all of our ABV. We'll be showing you that at the end so you can do a really close comparison of like what does a specific material look like after each extraction. And then generally for kind of setting the baseline for each hit, whenever we're wired in, I will be running at 420 degrees. That's where I personally run. I find it works very well. When we go wireless, we will run it at 450 degrees. So in our testing yesterday, we found that for the wireless performance, if you turn it up just a little bit, then ultimately the quality of hit is very consistent with a little lower temperature when you're wired in. So for each of the hits, we'll be loading the bowl, we'll be putting the housing on the bowl, we'll let it heat soak to get some of that additional conduction heating in there in addition to the convection, which is the hot air that comes through when you take your hit. And then we'll take our hit and dump out the ABV. All right, and we are just a couple degrees away from being preheated here. So real quickly, I just want to talk to you about the bowl that we're using today. This is the titanium stem bowl adapter, built specifically for the 360 series. It's definitely one of my favorite bowls to use. Very durable, has nice airflow, so it's pretty much always in my kit. The screen inside of here frictions against the side of the bowls to hold itself in place, which means that you can move it up or down to wherever you prefer. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in there. In terms of adjusting the screen, I generally will just kind of poke a finger in the top of the bowl and move it down. If you have to slide it back up, I'll use a brush and just go in the other end, and you can push it the opposite way. So I find that really easy to adjust. In terms of these first two bowls that we're going to be doing, they are pretty shallow. So we're looking at about 1/3 of my fingernail versus normally I would say I go to where my fingernail is fully inside of there. So just a quick comparison. This first hit, we are going to be doing it wired. So we're using the detachable coil, but we are not unplugging from the controller. We're just going to pop it on while plugged in and do a normal hit. So with that, let's go ahead and get our bowl loaded up. For that, this is something that I really love about the titanium bowl, is that you can use it almost directly as a scoop in your grinder. It makes it super easy to collect your flour. So the flour today, this is some pre-nut from our friends up the road at Pure. I know it is a wedding cake cross, but I can't remember what it's crossed with. Definitely think it's a funny name. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and take my bowl and scoop it right into my grinder here with the flour. I generally overfill it a bit. You can see that it's not really packed, and then I'll just lightly knock it off the top. This makes sure that none of that flour is going to get on the heater during our hit, and that we've got a nice clean hit. So that's our first bowl loaded. Check in on our temperatures. We are at 419, so I think we are ready to go. All right, we are all set up. Let's go ahead and take our first hit, fully wired at 420. That was a good hit. As you saw, I did a little bit longer of a heat soak just because we're using a smaller bowl. I'm generally interested in how long is a housing going to be on in total, as opposed to when do I start taking my hit. But here is our ABV. We'll get that dumped out, and we have a nice brown roasty color on it. It's really very even. I'm very happy with that hit. So this shows why we love the T360 so much. It just works. It just extracts super efficiently. You don't have to pull hard. It just gets you there every time. All right, so now we are getting ready for hit number 2. We're going to replicate basically exactly what we just did with hit number 1. Same size bowl, same heat soak, but we're going to do it all wirelessly. So I'm going to load my bowl the exact same way, gently scoop it through the grinder, overflow it a bit, lightly brush it off. That's looking really good right there. And make sure to remove any flour from the sides of the bowl just so that doesn't singe on the heater when you put it on. And now that that is ready, let's check our temperature. We're at 450. So that was kind of our early testing. We found a 30-degree difference. So we're going to do this hit at 450, but wirelessly. Let's see how it goes. All right, so just press that button, detach the coil. I do like to bend it a little. It's mostly aesthetic, but I do find it makes it easy to hold. Wow, that was good. And after you hit, you just pop the coil back in the plug, put it safely back in the porcelain stand. So let's see, temperature-wise, it's reading 342. Honestly, that hit was very, very similar to the first. That was a really good hit. We're gonna go ahead and pour out the ABV here. But I can tell you from inhaling, I did not notice a difference in performance on that small bowl. As we look at the ABV here, I will say just from an initial glance, we may be, call it 10% lighter, 15% lighter or so. But realistically for that small bowl, I personally did not notice a difference. You could see the vapor came through immediately. As soon as I started drawing, there was a powerful thick vapor. So that was a really pretty impressive test. All right, so after plugging it in, the coil has pretty much recovered here. You can see it went a little bit above, which is very normal, and then it'll drop down to the temperature. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and get ready for our third hit. And what this one is going to be is it's going to be the same as the second, so we're running at that 450 degrees, but what we're going to do is we're going to expand the bowl. So instead of this smaller kind of quote unquote taster bowl option, we're going to take it down to where I normally fill my bowls. And I think this will give us really important information over how much does the heat drop off when you have a lot of material. When you've got more flour in the bowl, you obviously need more heat to get it fully extracted, and so that's what this next test is designed to go after. So I'm just going with my finger and gently sliding that screen down, going back and forth to make sure it moves evenly, and then ultimately where we land, as you can see, it's like basically my full fingernail. Not quite. We got a lot of hits to do today, so give me a little bit of a break, but we pushed it down to a much bigger size. So we're gonna go ahead and load up our bowl. Let's check the controller. Yeah, we're at 456. So by the time our bowl is loaded, we're gonna be perfect temperature, ready to rock. So exact same method as the last couple. Scoop and dupe. I don't have a better name for it. Skip and dip. Knock it off the top. And there we go. Alrighty. And so like I said, for this third hit, this is a much bigger bowl. We're running at 450 degrees, and we are running wirelessly. So we're gonna see how much heat we can get out of that wireless setup. Alright. Go ahead and detach the coil. Give it a little bend just for funsies. Drop it on. Get the timer going. That was powerful. That was a good hit. So that's more representative of what my regular session is, where I fill the bowl to the point that I'm taking kind of 3 or 4 hits and I'm continuing to hit it until I stop seeing vapor. You could see from that on the first hit, on the second hit, even on the third hit, the vapor was immediate, it was thick, very, very flavorful. So that was quite impressive. Honestly, it got more power out of the wireless coil than I thought it would. So let's go ahead and dump our ABV here and let's see what color we ended up with. All right, so not surprisingly, a little lighter than the second one, but it is a very even roast. I think that's pretty impressive for a wireless device. I think that's due to the addition of the conduction heating, but really very even color throughout. For my personal use, I would probably set myself up to take this, call it another 15% darker, more similar to the first bowl that we did. So there is one feature of the new detachable coils that I want to call out that we kind of weren't expecting, but as we've been testing, we learned about, and I think it's really interesting. Because as I describe the 360 to customers and as I personally use it, I do describe it as a bit of a hobbyist device. And in that, I mean that it allows you insane amounts of control of exactly how extracted your flour is, how many hits you're doing to get there, and you can really dial everything to yourself personally. Now the difficulty of that is I would argue it is just a touch less shareable than some other devices like the QaromaLite Plus. So whenever I'm going to a big group event, generally I'm bringing a QaromaLite Plus because you don't really have to supervise people with that. They can leave it on the bowl for minutes. We've seen people leave it on for 5 or more minutes at events, and you're not getting combustion. The bowl does get warm, but then they do just get a nice flavorful hit. Something like the 360, because you have that active conductive heating, you can't necessarily leave it on the bowl as long. So if you're sharing with friends, we all have that person in the rotation who will put the housing on and then turn and start to tell a story. If that happens with a 360, I do have some concerns about combustion if that story goes on for a couple minutes. But the reason I bring that up is I think that the detachable coil really kind of solves that problem. What it does is it allows you to use it wired exactly how you want to. So for me, that's at 420 degrees with the titanium bowl. That's a 20-second heat soak for a big bowl, and it gets my material to kind of exactly where I want it every time. But now it's also much more shareable because I can detach it from there and pop it on, and I have much less concern when my friend is using it that they're going to get any accidental combustion if they just leave the housing on the bowl for a couple minutes and don't take their hit immediately. So I do think that it makes it a little more user-friendly for groups. Obviously, the flexibility of having this coil detached, it's a smaller footprint. You don't have the cable that you're attached to or tethered to anymore. So I think for kind of group and social settings, there are definitely some cool uses of this coil that we hadn't considered before. In terms of the traditional setup with the coil, I would say the main advantage that we see is an aesthetic one. So it's got the beautiful handles that come with the kits. There's also tons of ways to customize and personalize that. So this is probably how I'll continue using at home because I like the way that I have my personal station set up. But I do think that with the detachable coils, it opens up some doors for us in terms of events and going out with people, showing them different devices. That's really pretty interesting to me. Okay, so we are believers in the scientific method here at Ritual Colorado. Despite how high I currently am, we believe that there's one more test that is extremely important for you as the viewer. This is not because I really enjoy the flavor of this weed. The grapefruit comes through extremely loud. This is for you. So what we are going to do is the same size bowl as we just did, but we're going to do it wired. So this is my personal setup. This is how I use it all the time. And my theory, what I think is going to happen, is that the ABV that we have at the end of this bowl is going to be very similar to our first one. We're going to have a nice dark roast. It's going to be even throughout. And I think it'll be interesting to compare the 4 different ABVs and show kind of the different ways you can use these detachable wireless setups. So we'll go ahead and load our bowl, same way as always. And we are running low of flour. It's been a heavy day at the office. All right. And check our temps. Yeah, we are right in the ballpark. I'm happy with that. That's the good thing about this. This gives you an insane amount of precision. You don't necessarily need that. So within a couple degrees is usually good. So we'll go ahead and pop the housing on and let it heat soak. Ooh, that's your big boy. That one thoroughly got me. I'm gonna go ahead and dump the ABV next to the bowl that we just did. But yeah, no surprises. That is a beautiful dark roast throughout. Honestly, a little darker than the first one. That may be because I have less lungs by this point in the video, but I'm really happy with how that looks. So when you see the close-ups in the video, I would say this final bowl is generally what I'm targeting. It gets me a very flavorful beginning of the hit, and then full, really deep extraction, which I'm happy with. Thanks for checking out the video. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you found it informative. We're still playing with the detachable coils. I think there's a lot of fun experimentation to do here, but our early takeaway is there's some really cool positives. Drawback, I would say, is primarily aesthetic. For that reason, I'll probably keep using the other one at home, but I do think there's some unique advantages of the detachable and the wireless operation. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Definitely let us know how you use your ball vapes and if you're using a wireless one. And also let us know if there's any other content you want to see. We are Ritual Colorado. You can visit us online anytime at ritual-co.com, and also come visit us in store at 2521 Sheridan Boulevard. Thank you. Have a good one.